Okay, hi there and welcome to this demonstration tutorial. I've recorded this beforehand, so I'm going to take you through the steps and trying to remember what I did in each of those steps. So right through the whole process I'm using the Lasso tool extensively to select areas. And then I paint basically that area flat and then start to add the shading. So you'll see that I've made that part blue, and then I added the shade color to that where there's less light coming in to basically falling in that part of the object or the temple. Alright, so now I'm selecting the floor and I'm going to do the same using a slightly different blue and making it lighter and darker. And remember to add a bit of a shadow at the back of the pillars. Alright, and then I'm making the front slightly warmer. I'm playing around with the brush setting. So my problem here was the brush is too fine, and I adjusted the width, the pen pressure width to be not as fine, so giving me a broader stroke when I do the painting. Okay, so and then I'm selecting that area again and just adding a bit of warmth to the side of that. I think I forgot to add the shadow behind the pillars here, so let's see what I do. Yeah, so I'm adding the shadow behind the pillars. So yeah, using the Lasso tool makes certain areas, it makes it easier to paint certain areas. So a warmer color, but make it slightly darker than the top, and then I lighten the top half of it slightly, and then darker at the bottom. So the ramp, I'm going to use the blue color for the one side and then the warm color for the flat side. And then I'm going to grade the blue with on the flat side. You'll see that I make the edge quite dark, that corner, and then I lighten the front. Mostly using warm colors. Alright, so the pillar, if you understand how a cylinder is shaded, then it's quite easy to understand what I'm doing here. Okay, and then it's just a quick copy and paste of that. So in Photoshop, if you alt click drag, you can copy and paste a selection. So yeah, before I copy and paste the pillar, I finish all of the shading so that I only do it once. It's much easier than trying to paint that pillar twice, 3 times. So try and be effective by copying stuff as much as possible. Okay, using the clone tool to add another section to the pillar. Okay, so a bit of shading on the edges, highlights and shadows, so making the edges slightly lighter as it bends towards the light. edges usually are lighter. Alright, and there you can see that I've shaded the edge on the shade side, on the shadow side, slightly darker, but it's darker than the highlight, but lighter than the shadow color. So this part, when you do this part here, you also need to think it of as a cylinder instead of a big piece of concrete or stone. Think of it as a cylinder. So you will have highlight on the one side and shade on the other side. So it's just a biggish cylinder. Right, so the same here, flat side, so mostly the shadow color for that. A bit of highlight on the front and dark at the bottom and at the back. I'm starting to add some randomness to the coloring. And again, the highlighting the edges a little bit. Maybe it's a bit too light there. Okay. So the main thing with when you paint or when you digitally paint is try to do broad areas. So big, it's basically working from big to medium to fine detail. So never jump into the small detail too fast. So because you might need to change something, you might need to you might want to change the way lines go. So don't waste time adding fine detail and then later on you realize that you needed to need to redo a certain section, and it's going to take you so much more time to redo stuff, and you've already spent so many hours on a certain area. Rather go with a big detail first and then work your way down to the finer details. Okay, so here I'm adding a bit of shading or ambient occlusion. Okay, so right, so I'm adding those brick lines or seams on another layer, so that I can tweak them if something goes wrong. Then I don't have to repaint the bottom part. But I don't put everything on its own layer. It's just certain areas where I think I might mess it up. Let's create a new layer. I don't have too many layers. Okay, so and then using the eraser to clean up overlaps. So just defining those seams a little bit better. Alright, so now I've merged that, and then now I can paint all of the highlights and shadows in. So I'm back on a single layer. Okay, cutting another seam in there. And then a highlight on the front facing edge. Okay, so you'll see I do a lot of color picking, but sometimes, and especially with highlights, you'll see that I open up the color selecting tool just to make the colors bright again. If you keep on color picking colors, the colors start to get dull. So try to brighten up colors if you do color picking from your image. Right, yeah, so there I've used color picked two colors, and then using the X on the keyboard to swap between the one and the other color. I do that a lot, where I color pick two colors and then using X on the keyboard to swap the colors out. So here I'm doing it again, color picking one light color and then a darker color, and then basically to do a gradient from light to dark. Adding a little bit more ambient occlusion in that corner. Refining some of the edges here. Okay, so adding a bit of reflective light on the back of the pillar and at the bottom of that stone edge. Right, cutting, note that I've created a new layer again to do the seams. This gives me control over, if I make a mistake, it gives me control over how I correct my mistakes. You'll see that I change one of the lines positions. I think this one here, so selecting that and then moving it down. Moving this line down as well, and basically adjusting its angles. Okay, and then erasing the overlaps. And then erasing where it's not necessary. Okay, and then join the two layers, merge the layers down and start adding the details on the edges, basically highlights and shadows and enhancing some of the edges. Make some of the corners of the stones a little bit rounder. And then just adding a few random dents and crevices and wear and tear on the stones. Try not to make the dents too dark, especially for the top parts. You can always make it darker later on, but keep it very, very subtle. Continue adding the highlights on the edges. Just refining some of the crevices and the seams, so basically making them deeper. with a slightly darker color. You'll see that I don't go black. I don't use black. Stay away from black. You can always make things black later on, but once you've got black in the scene, it makes it much harder to control. So try to make it a darker version of whatever color you've got without taking it all the way to black. Now I'm just adding a bit of detail on those dents and crevices. Not too much detail. Don't worry about fine detail at this stage. So medium detail. I'm going to add a bit of shadow color underneath at the top of the pillars. Notice that I made the color, the brush mode to multiply. Remember to put it back to normal. Okay, adding a few cracks. Cutting away the corner there to make it look like a piece of it has broken off. So to make the cracks stand out a little bit better and make it believable, remember we need to add a bit of a highlight on the edge that's facing the light. So it's not adding highlights around all of the crack, but just the parts that are facing the light source. Adding a bit of highlights in the shadow side on the edges just to make them pop out a little bit better. Making the crevices darker. Note again that I didn't make it black, just a darker version of that specific blue, but it's not black. Right, so I've created a new layer now. So I'm using a very textured brush here. I think it's one of the default brushes. I didn't create this brush, but if you know how to create your own brushes, it's very easy to create a brush with textures. Just adding a bit of texture using the same colors that's in the scene and varying it a little bit, so using warmer colors, cooler colors, just to add variation and texture to the stone and the rocks. So basically making it look more rock-like. Okay, so here I'm making the selection. I created a layer mask for it. I'm just painting the mask white. The outside edges is not painted anymore. So I'm using another brush here and then just painting over the seams. So basically using the mask and painting away whatever I don't want. So when you work with mask, if you paint with black, you're removing. If you're painting with white, you're basically adding again. So it's not the painted layer that we're working on, it's the mask that we're using to add and remove whatever we've painted on the layer. Working the seams to remove all of the texture there, and then where textures are a bit too harsh, I also paint over that to remove some of the paint, the texture. Okay, there you can see what the mask looks like. Right, I set the layer to something different. I think I played around with the various modes. Let's see what I did. I think I said overlay in the end. Yeah, I think I used overlay. Let's have a look. Darker. Yeah, overlay, and then I changed the fill opacity to something like 54. So it's subtle, it's there, but it's not all overpowering. If you don't do the texture, the rocks, the stone look flat. So now I'm going to paint a moss texture, looking for a textured brush like that, and then I'm going to use like a bluish green color, just dotting a few green dots to suggest moss growth in the stone. And moss grow in crevices and at the bottom where there's more damp and moisture. Changing the color again, you see that I use various greens, light, dark, warmer, cooler. Just adding a bit of detail to the moss. I'm going to use the painting layer again to make a selection and then get rid of the overpaint. So invert it I think this time I just used the eraser to remove the overpaint. Okay, so I'm adding a dirt layer now, using another softer brush, and then using just a very dark brown color, dark grey brown color to add dirt. Okay, again doing the same, using the paint layer as this selection, and then just deleting the outside. Make the paint that dirt layer multiply, and then just adjust the full opacity till you are happy with that. So by now I think I'm done, but I'm using a color balance adjustment layer here just to tweak the stone's color. So adjusting the midtones a little bit here till I'm happy. And then I'm going to highlights, adjusting the highlights slightly warmer. And then the shadows a little bit cooler. And then I'm going to do adjust the full opacity again on this, just to reduce the intensity of that. So basically that's it. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.